Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. So far on this channel, we've been covering patch 11.2 pretty diligently, going over all of the major changes, seasonal adjustments, gearing improvements, many class changes and tier sets, but I also wanted to highlight some of the smaller changes arriving as part of this update, because every major content feature comes out with a new raid, new dungeons, new class changes, shiny new tier sets, a bunch of mounts for you to collect, but then there's also other little quality of life upgrades and small systematic improvements, and even Blizzard potentially spoiling what the next allied race of the next expansion or next patch is probably going to be. Smaller updates like these usually get missed out by many, so I wanted to combine them together into a one singular video, going over and listing every new little upgrade or small feature or a little improvement that will be part of the major 11.2 seasonal content update. As always, if you guys want to keep up with any class changes for 11.2, which we'll be doing a lot more guides over the next few weeks, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So one of the first small quality of life features that's arriving in 11.2 is the spark management. You know, with this expansion and with Dragonflight, we have a lot more components when it comes to crafting. And don't get me wrong, being able to craft really strong endgame gear is awesome, but a lot of this reagents does mean that you need to allocate space within your bank and manage it and take it out, pull it back in. Managing sparks in particular is something that they're looking to actually try to solve or try to make it a little bit easier going forward. Now, sparks normally is a physical item that you will have in your inventory. You'll have fragments which you can combine together into a proper spark, which could then be used in order to upgrade and make gear on a character. However, they're actually changing it, so instead of being a physical item that fills a physical slot, they're just transferred over into the currency tab instead, which is kind of where all the items go that don't need to populate your physical inventory in any way. So you'll be able to see spark charges, or rather spark fragments, separately in your currency tab, and you'll see how many you are behind for that season as well. So now you have a little bit more of this tooltip that lets you know if you're keeping up with it, or maybe if you still can get a couple more fragments in order to be able to craft even more items for the season. I think it's just one of those little conveniences that one removes an item out of your inventory, so one less thing to manage, but also gives you information if in case you're behind any of your sparks for the season, so you know that you can go do some endgame activities in order to catch up to craft yourself yet another upgrade. Now, one of the lesser known customization options that players don't really get to utilize that much are some of the different glamour items that enchanters can craft in the War Within. And there's a variety of different glamours. In fact, enchanters can actually even make like shoulder enchants that can give you like momentary, temporary buffs, or I guess special effects on your armor that you can utilize for mods and stuff. But Gleeful Armor or Gleeful Glamour is an item that allows you to don a mask to change yourself into another look entirely from any of the WoW's playable races in the game. So for example, if you cannot play a Nightborn Demon Hunter but always wanted to see what one would look like, outside of using toys like the Recalibrator, you can also just purchase a glamour, and when you equip it in a character, you just don the appearance of whatever race you made the choice of. I wouldn't go with a bald look for a Nightborn, but it doesn't look that bad. And you can see some of the animations, which on Nightborn in particular, they do work, even backflips and such. And a new glamour is going to be made available in the patch 11.2, and that is the glamour of the Ethereal. Now, most of the glamours, what's interesting about this, in fact, is most glamours are of playable races within World of Warcraft. So think of the dwarves, the Dark Iron, normal dwarves, the Earthern, the Tauren, High Mountain Tauren. Basically anything that can be made into a character, you could put on the glamour of that playable race. But ethereals are not playable, and some people assume not playable yet as the key word, as they are basically, even in Tooltip, described as denizens of Azeroth. So I wonder if this is partially Blizzard just letting us know, hey, we're going to make Ethereals a playable race option going forward, or maybe even an allied race in the future. Or maybe they're just going to expand it to other races in general, even the non-playable ones through glamours over the next few updates, as they'll likely continue the whole Gleeful Glamour and keep upgrading it, I imagine, in Midnight and onwards. The next quality of life update comes to delves, and I think delves for the most part have been pretty successful. A large number of players have actually been diving into delves, and for some, that is the form of endgame progression for the most part when it comes to season after season. So I think it's fair to say they're fairly successful. However, we can all agree that the underwater delves are a bane of everyone's existence. If a delve forces you to have to swim through underwater, which functions very differently than just like normal ground, it means jumping around, moving around, and even having to manage your breath. Those things do become very, very annoying within delve content. So they're actually just sucking out all the water from underwater delves in season 3. So the whole underwater mechanic, it's gone. So you'll be able to have a bit better control over your character. Even using abilities like float, for example, can allow you to skip some mad distances. You will have some movement speed buffs whenever you pick up bubbles on the ground, but you no longer have to deal with underwater breathing or anything like that. And I think for the most part, it actually does make delves even more playable than before. When it comes to upgrading your character's gear, there's a number of currencies that you need to manage with, and one of the currencies is actually technically a seasonal currency called Valor Stones. They heard a lot of players' feedback, and you're not gonna have to reform Valor Stones with a brand new season. Valor Stones from season 1, 2, or 3 will no longer be a currency that resets on a brand new season, which makes it much easier when it comes to having to keep up with all of your character's gear and upgrading items early on. It also allows you to stock up a bunch of Valor Stones early on all of your old characters, so then when you dive into content in the next season, then you're able to upgrade those items relatively quickly. Kind of want to pull a 180 on this video and go back to talking about delves. And one of the coolest things about delves in particular is, while they don't usually offer you some of the strongest gear out there, since delves cannot be obtained at Mythic Track gear, the trinkets from delves, season after season, continue to be some of the strongest things they've ever created. Like dungeon trinkets, raid trinkets, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, and sometimes they're overly engineered. That it does seem like that's what we're getting in the Omega raid. However, delve trinkets are usually so simple, but are incredibly powerful even on hero track. So Blizzard wanted to add a way for you to be able to purchase those trinkets from a vendor. Yes, we're finally getting a delve vendor for any delve players to be able to at least purchase a champion track version of these trinkets once you reach rank 3 of the delver's journey for the season, which will allow a trinket vendor to spawn in. Every single one of these trinkets is going to cost you around 2,000 undercoins, which is not that bad, honestly, as majority of the items that were of any value in season 2 were about 2,000, and they were relatively doable week after week. Like, players could always summon the underpin within delves for 2,000 undercoins, so it really wasn't that bad. And some of those trinkets, at least when it comes to testing so far in the PTR, are some of the strongest out there, especially that healer trinket that spawns these sprites that keep giving everybody shields. That one has been played to death when it comes to dungeon testing, and if anybody's going to be able to get that trinket on like high-end hero track, that thing is going to be probably, unless it gets tuned, insanity when it comes to healers and M+ content, at least especially early on. So they finally added a way for you to be able to purchase delve trinkets, even a champion track, but there's still probably going to be some of the stronger items, and you'll be able to guarantee obtain them, which will make it easier for you to gear your ults heading into the next season. Now, over the last few expansions, Blizzard has done a pretty good job, I think, tuning a lot of the different ratios when it comes to endgame progression, and a lot of the ratios really come down to flavor more than anything. Some are slightly stronger than others in very certain content, but for the most part, they're as balanced as they could be, except for the Night Elf racial, because, especially in Mythic Plus content, Night Elf racial allows you to completely skip dungeon packs within M+, and so far as a strategy, it has become a very powerful tool, especially when it comes to high-end Mythic Plus dungeons. So they wanted to find a way for players to be able to even those odds against Night Elf players and everybody else. So they actually created a potion called Umbra Essentium, which allows the player to slink into the shadows, reducing the chance of enemies to detect your presence, essentially functioning like the Night Elf Shadow Meld ability that allows them to vanish out of sight, drop all aggro, and have all the enemies attacking them instantly just go back to where they were to reset. So hopefully this potion will allow more tanks that aren't necessarily Night Elves to have this skip opportunity. This potion, however, is a combat potion, so it'll have a cooldown with other combat potions, where potentially you could use a damage dealing potion. You'll now have to sacrifice some damage, but to give yourself that Shadow Meld Night Elf skip with also a 5-minute cooldown. And I wonder if we'll see something like this in the future, where they'll be adding other consumables that copy the ratios of other races as well. If let's say one becomes the meta, the best pick option for rating or Mythic Plus content, or if they'll potentially will do a bit of tuning when it comes to ratios, buffing some, nerfing others, or better yet, letting players choose which ratios they want to run, making race option more of a cosmetic thing, an aesthetic choice, but allowing players to have combat ratios to be something that you choose as part of your endgame progression. Speaking of Mythic Plus dungeons, you ever just queue for a dungeon and then something goes wrong? Maybe like you wipe the first pull, or maybe somebody accidentally pulls a pack you didn't mean to, and then you have someone in the group, possibly someone toxic, instantly leave the key if they know like we can't complete it, or they just get bored of it, or whatever it may be. Leavers have been a plague for Mythic Plus players, especially if you play the game more casually. You want to explore these dungeons at your own pace, but if let's say you're not going too quick or not doing the meta pulls, it's not uncommon to have somebody just dip out of the group without really any repercussions by Blizz or anyone. However, in 11.2, there is going to be now a vote abandoned for Mythic Plus dungeons, as well as a deserter debuff. Players that leave keystones early will be prompted with a warning that if they do not come back to the group to finish the key, they'll actually be marked with a keystone deserter debuff. And this debuff will follow them into any future dungeons they sign up for. So when you sign up for a key, players will see that this guy is a deserter. Or if let's say you do manage to start a group yourself, everybody looking at your group will see that this key has a person, maybe a lead, who is a deserter, a keystone deserter, kind of like Scarlet Mark in the player in LFG. Players with this mark will need to complete a Mythic Plus dungeon without leaving, even if they don't time the key, to be able to remove the debuff completely to be put back into good standing. But this, in a sense, can give players at least a bit of a warning that if, hey, you don't want to run dungeons with deserters, you can avoid those players completely. If you don't want to have players that will dip out of your key immediately, you can avoid inviting those players into a group to begin with. However, if let's say you do run a keystone and it just goes awfully wrong, everything goes terrible, you make all the wrong pulls, somebody DCs mid-fight, there's just absolutely no way for you to truck all the way through that key and it's just absolutely dead in the water, you will also be able to vote abandon a key as well. If at least 4 players vote to abandon a keystone, players will be teleported out of the dungeon without any debuffs of deserter given out to any of the other players, which should hopefully encourage more participation and collaboration between players. If everybody decides, you know, I'm done with this key, you want to dip out of it, nobody is going to take a hit on it. And if somebody just keeps constantly dipping out of keys way too early, you should at least be able to avoid those players next to me running your Mythic Plus dungeons. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, link to that found in the description of every single video, especially if you want to keep up with any new updates regarding patch 11.2, which is releasing oh so soon. As usual, be sure to let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.